I never wanted to be part of an HOA. My family had run this ranch, over 120 acres of red Texas soil and scrubland, for 3 generations. It wasn't just land. It was memory, history, legacy. But when a shiny new subdivision called Copper Hill Estates went up right next door, the county redrew the zoning map without my consent. Just like that, I became part of the Copper Hill Homeowners Association. And that's when Karen Lively waltzed into my life, like a tornado in pearls. Karen Lively was the self-crowned queen of Copper Hill, the kind of woman who treated neighborhood bylaws like scripture and her clipboard like a sword. Bleach blonde, loud as a chainsaw, and with sunglasses big enough to qualify as riot gear, she ruled the HOA like a petty dictator. Most folks bent the knee just to avoid her constant complaints. I didn't. From the start, Karen had a problem with me. She called my ranch an eyesore, complained that the smell of livestock was uninviting to potential homebuyers. She once filed a written grievance because one of my cows mooed during her online yoga class. But the most ridiculous demand came 6 weeks ago when she told me my prize bull, Thunder, had to be relocated. He's visible from the community trail, she said, jabbing a manicured finger toward my pasture. HOA regulations prohibit non-decorative livestock from being visible from common areas. I stared at her, barely restraining a laugh. Lady, he's a bull, not a lawn ornament. You'll receive a formal warning. Next step is a fine. I didn't move Thunder. He was penned well within my property, behind reinforced fencing, and had every right to be there. Thunder was more than livestock, he was legacy. A purebred Texas Longhorn with lineage going back decades. His genetics alone were worth a small fortune, and his presence was a point of pride for the entire Barnes family. Karen didn't care about pride. She cared about control. Over the next few weeks, the harassment escalated. Anonymous complaints about dangerous animals. Late-night visits from HOA reps, claiming to be inspecting for safety hazards. I installed cameras, locked the gates tighter, told myself she'd get bored and move on. I was wrong. One Tuesday morning, I found the east gate wide open. At first, I thought it was the wind until I saw the boot prints in the mud. Not mine. Not my ranch hands. Strangers. My stomach sank. I sprinted toward the southern pasture, calling Thunder's name. Normally, he'd come trotting over, snorting like a freight train and waiting for an apple or a scratch behind the horn. Not today. I found him slumped by the water trough. Still. Too still. There was a hole in his side. Clean. Centered. A bullet wound. My legs went numb. I dropped to my knees beside him, placed a hand on his flank. Cold. No breath. No life. The vet confirmed it later. Single high-powered rifle shot. Likely from a hunting rifle. Clean kill. Intentional. But it wasn't a hunt. It was murder. I paced the perimeter like a madman, searching for clues. Found a spent casing, .308 caliber, buried halfway in the dirt. Fresh tire marks outside the gate. No note. No apology. Just death and silence. I called the sheriff. Deputy Holt arrived an hour later, his mouth a grim line as he examined the scene. You lock that gate? He asked. Every night. Someone knew the code. I didn't say it. I didn't have to. Karen. That night, I stood on my porch, staring out at the dark line of the HOA subdivision blinking in the distance like a swarm of parasites. Karen's house was the brightest, decorated with string lights and ceramic deer, a cruel mockery given what had happened. I wasn't crying, but I wasn't breathing easy either. Thunder was gone, and I was done playing polite. Karen thought she ran Copper Hill. She thought she could twist the rules, treat my legacy like a nuisance, and get away with it. She didn't know who she was messing with. The next morning, I marched straight to the HOA clubhouse. Karen Lively sat behind a faux mahogany desk like she was mayor of a kingdom no one asked to live in. She wore her signature pink visor, sipped a green smoothie through a metal straw, and didn't bother looking up as I approached. You've got 10 seconds to tell me why there were hunters on my land, I said, voice flat as a dead prairie. She didn't blink. Good morning to you, too, Mr. Barnes. If this is about that unfortunate livestock incident. His name was Thunder, and he was shot through the chest behind a locked gate. Karen offered a sympathetic tilt of her head that belonged in a courtroom drama. That's very sad. Truly. But as president of the HOA, I had to make a decision for community safety. Deer, coyotes, even wild hogs have been spotted too close to residential zones. I merely authorized licensed wildlife consultants to conduct a controlled cull. A cull, I repeated, disbelief crackling in my throat. You sent armed men onto private property without permission and called it wildlife control? The eastern pasture borders the community trail, she said sweetly. Under Section 3.4 of the Copper Hill Estates Covenant, that qualifies as shared-use buffer land. It's clearly marked in the revised bylaws. I leaned in, lowering my voice to a warning growl. That land's mine. Been in my family for 70 years. Your buffer ends at my fence. Karen smiled, saccharine and smug. Maybe. Maybe not. Boundaries can be fluid when they're not properly documented. Perhaps your grandfather didn't keep very good records. She was bluffing, but it didn't matter. She had a stack of papers, a rubber-stamped board, and a frightening ability to twist bureaucracy into a weapon. I left before I did something I'd regret. At home, I combed through every document I owned, deeds, surveys, maps from 1953. Everything confirmed the same truth. The land was mine. The gate, the fence, the pasture. All mine. Karen's buffer zone fantasy was a fabrication built on arrogance and bad intentions. But the sheriff wouldn't act without proof. Need to know who pulled the trigger, Deputy Holt said, thumbing through his notepad. You got cameras on the gate? I cursed under my breath. The east-facing camera had gone out the week before during a thunderstorm. Of course it had. Holt shrugged. I'll talk to Karen, but don't expect much. She's got the HOA wrapped around her finger. He was right. At the next board meeting, Karen sat at the head of the table, flanked by her loyal stooges, retired dentist, yoga instructor, former HOA president who now served as historian emeritus. I wasn't even allowed to speak. This is an internal matter, she declared, gavel in hand. We sympathize with Mr. Barnes' unfortunate loss, but the HOA acted within its rights to protect the community from potential harm. Harm? I shouted from the back. Thunder was penned and fenced. He never left his pasture in 5 years. Her eyes flicked to mine. Cold. Calculating. There was a credible threat reported by multiple residents. A large animal near the trail. We took action. Lies. Every word. Afterward, 2 neighbors I barely knew approached me in the parking lot. An older couple, the Martins, who'd lived in Copper Hill long before it went upscale. We didn't report anything, Mr. Martin said quietly. But Karen's been talking about hiring hunters for months. Said your cattle made the area feel too rural. Like we didn't belong in our own homes anymore. His wife nodded. She's turning this place into a gated zoo, with herself as the zookeeper. That night, I made a decision. Karen wanted a war of paperwork, a fight waged through bylaws and bogus citations. But I knew a better battlefield, facts, witnesses, and the one thing Karen didn't think anyone had the patience to collect: proof. She thought she could bury the truth beneath HOA jargon and procedural fog. But she made one mistake. She underestimated just how far a grieving rancher would go to protect what's his. I didn't care how long it took. I was going to find the hunters. I was going to trace the bullet. I was going to drag Karen Lively's lies into the daylight and burn every page of her power with it. The first lead came from the casing I found near Thunder's body, a .308 Winchester round, clean and unweathered. I took it to an old friend, Jed Ramirez, a ballistics expert and former Marine armorer who now ran a gun shop out near the county line. Jed turned the casing over under the fluorescent lights, inspecting the head stamp and firing pin impression with a jeweler's loop. Remington core-locked, he muttered. Popular round. Clean primer dent. Bolt-action rifle. Judging by the powder residue, this shot was fired recently. Day, maybe 2. Can you match it? I asked. Jed nodded slowly. Maybe. If I can get my hands on the weapon. You find out who these hunters were. Not yet. But I've got a name. That name came from a slip-up. 2 days after the HOA meeting, I overheard Karen bragging on a call while I walked past the clubhouse. Her voice carried, sharp and arrogant. She mentioned someone named Ray. Said he was owed a favor for taking care of the livestock situation.
Ray.
Not a common name in these parts, but it rang a bell. Ray Faulkner ran a nuisance wildlife company 2 counties over. Special permits. Specialized hunts. For the right price, he'd relocate a gator or eliminate a rogue coyote without asking too many questions. I paid him a visit. His office was a converted trailer with antlers nailed to the siding. He met me at the door with a wary look, chewing a toothpick and wearing a camo vest like a badge of honor. Did a job for the Copper Hill HOA last week, he admitted, scratching his chin. Lady said she had a wild bull threatening her walkers. That wild bull was penned, registered. And you shot him on private property. Ray paled slightly. She said it was common land. Had a map and everything. Showed me where to set up. I clenched my fists, but kept my voice steady. You remember what rifle you used? He shrugged. My Remington 700. Standard setup. Always used that for livestock, clean shot, no mess. I didn't need to say more. Jed confirmed it 2 hours later. The casing matched Ray's rifle like a fingerprint. I had my shooter. Now I needed to tie Karen to the crime. Deputy Holt agreed to help, quietly. She tricked him into trespassing, he said, flipping through the pages of the incident report. If we can prove she falsified property lines, that's criminal misrepresentation. Maybe more. We subpoenaed the HOA's private security footage and digital correspondence. Took days. Karen stalled, claimed the server was down. But eventually, we got access, thanks to a warrant and a very annoyed county judge. That's when everything snapped into place. Emails between Karen and Ray. Her instructions to use the Eastern Trailhead Gate, which she claimed gave full access to HOA buffer zones. A satellite map she'd crudely edited to make my fence line appear inside community property. Worse, a voice message where she told Ray to make sure it's quick. Don't need a bunch of animal lovers throwing a fit. It was all there. Intent. Deception. Malice. Still, I didn't feel vindicated. Not yet. That came when I walked into the next HOA board meeting with Deputy Holt at my side, a USB drive in my pocket, and a folder full of documentation under my arm. Karen was mid-sentence, something about garden gnome height regulations, when I stepped up to the podium and cleared my throat. I'd like to address the board regarding the unauthorized killing of my livestock. Karen's eyes narrowed. You've already made your grievances known, Mr. Barnes. Unless you have something new to present. I do, I said, holding up the folder. Ballistics match. Trespasser confession. Digital proof that you, Karen Lively, knowingly sent a hired gun onto private property to eliminate an animal you didn't like. The room fell silent. Deputy Holt stepped forward and placed a printed warrant on the table. Karen Lively, you're being charged with conspiracy to trespass, falsification of documents, and destruction of private property. Her mouth opened.
Closed.
Opened again. You can't be serious, she sputtered. This is outrageous. I was protecting the community. From what? I asked. A bull behind a locked fence? The board members stared at her like they were seeing her for the first time, not as a leader, but as a tyrant in lipstick. Karen was escorted out of the clubhouse, shouting the whole way. And I stood there, silent, the ghost of thunder beside me, proud and still. But I wasn't done yet. Her downfall had begun. Karen Lively's arrest sent shockwaves through Copper Hill. The woman who once strutted through HOA meetings like a queen now found herself paraded in handcuffs past the same manicured flower beds she once micromanaged. Neighbors whispered behind closed blinds. Others openly celebrated, finally free of the woman who policed mailbox paint colors with military precision. But justice is rarely quick. And it's never clean. Karen made bail within 24 hours, backed by a lawyer who specialized in HOA litigation and media manipulation. She spun her arrest as a misunderstanding, claiming she was set up by a disgruntled rancher exploiting an unfortunate incident. She even suggested Thunder's death was self-inflicted, an accident from unauthorized fencing practices. It was obscene. I could have sued then and there. Civil court would have happily heard my case. But I wanted more than damages. I wanted every nail of her empire pulled loose, one board at a time. So I ran for HOA president. It started as a joke at first, my name scrawled onto the nomination sheet in angry handwriting. But something changed when the Martins, the retired couple who had warned me early on, knocked on my door with a list of signatures. 50 homes, all pledging support. You stood up when everyone else bowed, Mrs. Martin said. It's time we stood with you. I had planned to lead a rebellion. But Thunder deserved nothing less. The campaign was quiet but relentless. I printed flyers with images of Karen's falsified maps and her email to Ray Faulkner. I hosted backyard meetings, grilled burgers, and told neighbors what really happened that day, how close she came to putting a bullet into someone's child hiking that trail. The community listened. And more importantly, they remembered. On election day, the results came in just after sunset. I won in a landslide. Karen didn't attend the final vote. She'd been banned from board activities pending trial. But I imagined her sitting alone in her oversized sunroom, watching the news coverage with clenched teeth and a bitter glass of Pinot. The first thing I did as president was overhaul the bylaws, cleaned out the vague clauses, redefined property boundaries, and stripped the board's emergency enforcement powers. Then I passed a motion to revoke Karen's HOA membership altogether. It passed unanimously. But it wasn't until I stood again in front of the community, this time as their elected leader, that I finally felt the arc of justice settle. I didn't want this job, I told them honestly. All I wanted was to raise my livestock in peace. But sometimes peace only comes when good folks stand up to bad rules, and worse people who hide behind them. Let's build a community where fences are respected, animals are safe, and power isn't something you wield, it's something you earn. They applauded. Some cheered. I just nodded and walked off the stage, my boots thudding against the polished wood floor Karen used to call her executive platform. A week later, I held a small ceremony for Thunder. Buried him under the old oak on the West Ridge, where the hills roll wide and open. Placed a simple plaque, Thunder, strong, loyal, free. As I stood there, the wind rolling through the grass like a whispered promise, I felt something ease in my chest. Not forgiveness, never that. But closure. Karen's trial came and went. She was fined, sentenced to probation, and barred from holding any leadership position in any HOA for 10 years. The public shame stuck longer than the punishment. She sold her home and moved to a gated retirement village 3 states away. Ray Faulkner's business took a hit too. No one wanted to hire the guy who shot a prize bull and called it pest control. But the real change came in the community itself. Fences got repainted, not policed. The board worked with, not over, residents. The land breathed easier, like it had finally shrugged off a heavy yoke. As for me, I kept ranching.
Built the new barn.
Bought 2 more bulls. One of them I named Justice. Big, broad-shouldered beast. Reminded me of Thunder, but wilder. Every now and then, I take Justice to the fence line, let him look out over the fields where it all started. And I remind myself, what's mine is worth protecting. Not just with deeds or walls, but with spine. Because when you stand up to tyrants, you don't just reclaim your land. You reclaim your dignity.